November 12th, 1959, Universal Studios, Los Angeles. Clint Eastwood sat across from Arthur Morrison, whose mahogany desk probably cost more than Clint's truck. "We're terminating your contract, Eastwood." 18 months at Universal. 18 months of bit parts, screen tests, and promise. Gone. "Your Adam's apple protrudes too much. You speak too slowly. And that chipped tooth you refuse to fix? That's not the Universal look." Clint's jaw tightened. The thing he'd been born with was now a career liability. 29 years old, and Hollywood had spit him out. "I see." 2 words, all he could manage. "You can collect your final check from accounting. We wish you the best." Clint walked through Universal's corridors carrying his termination notice like a death certificate. Outside, the California sun was too bright. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. He'd left his family in Northern California for this. Given up steady work. Believed the recruiters who said he had that special something. Now he was just another guy with a truck payment and no job. 50 feet away, another termination meeting was beginning. Burton Leon Reynolds Jr. couldn't sit still. His knee bounced as he waited outside Morrison's office. 23 years old. Contract player for 6 months. The secretary's sympathetic smile told him everything. "Mr. Reynolds? Mr. Morrison will see you now." The office smelled like leather and cologne. Morrison looked up with the enthusiasm of a man about to swat a fly. "Reynolds, your contract's being terminated, effective immediately." No build-up, just the truth, dropped like a brick. "What did I do wrong?" Morrison sighed. "You lack discipline. You ad-lib too much. You don't take direction. Simply put, you're not cut out for this business. You're a bad actor, Reynolds." Each word was a nail. Bad actor dismissed everything Bert had worked for. "I can improve. Give me another chance." The decision's final. Morrison was already reaching for his next file. "Accounting will have your check." Bert walked out on unsteady legs. 6 months. Everything he had. Gone. He left college football for this. Dropped out of Florida State, where he'd been somebody. His father had warned him. Everyone had told him Hollywood was a graveyard for small-town kids with big dreams. Turned out, they'd all been right. Bert pushed through the doors into the parking lot. Then he saw him. Another guy, about 30, walking toward the parking area with the same shell-shocked expression, the same white paper, the same defeated shoulders. Their eyes met across 20 feet of asphalt. Without a word, they both knew. Clint was halfway to his truck when he spotted the kid. Early 20s, clean cut, holding what was obviously a termination notice. The kid was trying hard not to look devastated and failing. They were heading in the same direction, paths converging near a battered Ford pickup. "Yours, Anaryer?" the kid asked, nodding at the truck. "Yeah." Clint unlocked the door, then paused. "You too?" The kid held up his termination letter. 6 months. "You?" 18. Clint leaned against the truck bed. "What did they get you for?" "Adam's apple sticks out. Talk too slow. Chipped tooth." Clint laughed bitterly. "You? Bad actor." They didn't sugarcoat it. They stood in silence. 2 strangers, united by rejection. The sun was brutal on the blacktop. In the distance, a studio tour bus rolled past, full of tourists who still believed Hollywood was magical. "I'm Clint." "Bert." They shook hands, gripped firm despite everything. "So," Bert said, trying for levity, "what's a guy with an oversized Adam's apple supposed to do with the rest of his day?" Clint considered. He'd planned to drive home, pour a whiskey, contemplate crawling back to Northern California. But looking at this kid, seeing his own devastation reflected back, something else occurred to him. "You drink beer?" Bert blinked. "What?" "There's a bar about 2 miles from here. Cheap, quiet. Nobody who'll give a damn that we just got kicked to the curb." For the first time since leaving Morrison's office, something like a smile tugged at Bert's mouth. "I could drink a beer." "Good, because I'm buying. Figure if we're going down, might as well go down together." Neither knew that simple invitation was about to become the foundation of something lasting 59 years. Murphy's Tavern wasn't much to look at. Cracked vinyl booths, a scarred wooden bar, neon signs advertising Schlitz and Budweiser. But it was dark, cool, and empty at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Clint ordered 2 Budweisers. The bartender took one look at them and didn't ask questions. Just popped the caps and slid the bottles across. They found a booth in the back. Bert slumped into the seat. Clint methodically peeled the label off his bottle. "So," Bert said after a long pull, "what now?" "That's the question." Clint took a drink. "I've got maybe 2 months of savings. After that, construction maybe. I've got less. Moved out here 6 months ago with everything in a duffel bag. Spent most on acting classes, headshots. Now I'm broke, unemployed, and according to Universal, talentless." They sat in silence, letting the weight settle. Then Clint said something that would become legendary between them. "You know what your real problem is?" Bert looked up. "What?" "You're in big trouble, buddy." "Why's that?" Clint leaned back, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Because I can learn to act. That's just practice. But you've got actual talent. You're funny, likable. Problem is, you're too damn alive for the studio system." Bert stared. "That's my problem? Me? I've got an Adam's apple the size of Texas. I talk like I'm underwater, and my face is wrong. What the hell am I supposed to do with that?" The absurdity hit them simultaneously. They just had their dreams crushed, and here they were, cataloging their inadequacies. Bert started laughing first. Real laughter, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. Clint joined in, and for a minute, they just laughed at the sheer ridiculousness of Hollywood. When they caught their breath, Bert asked, "So what are you going to do?" Clint's expression shifted. The humor drained away, replaced by something harder. "Prove them wrong." "How?" "I don't know yet, but Morrison said I talk too slow. I'm just going to do what the public wants. Kill a lot of people and beat up a lot of people." The words were flip, almost joking, but underneath ran absolute conviction. Bert grinned. "Yeah, you're great at that." "Damn right I am." They ordered another round, then another. Not to get drunk, just to extend the moment, to postpone reality. Around them, Murphy slowly filled with afternoon regulars, construction workers, salesmen. But in their corner booth, Clint and Bert were in their own world. "You married?" Bert asked. "Was. Didn't take." "You?" "No. Came close. Girl back in Florida. Her daddy made it clear I wasn't good enough." "Was he right?" "Probably. I've got $5 in my pocket. That's my entire net worth." Clint pulled out his wallet. 3 bills. $7. They looked at each other, and somehow that made them laugh again. As afternoon stretched into evening, they talked. Really talked. About families, dreams, fears. Bert talked about Florida, his police chief father, college football, seeing James Dean and knowing that's what he wanted. Clint talked about childhood poverty, working odd jobs since 12, about the Army, Korea, the plane crash over the Pacific that should have killed him. "You were in a plane crash?" "Bomber ran out of fuel. Had to ditch. Swam 2 miles to shore." Clint said it like describing a grocery trip. "Point is, I didn't quit then. Not planning to quit now." The bartender came by. "What do we owe?" $12 even. They pooled their money. Clint's 7, Bert's 5. Exactly $12. Not a penny left. "Guess we're committed now," Bert laughed. As they stood to leave, Clint extended his hand. "If you need anything, a place to crash, a meal, someone to run lines with, you've got my number." Bert shook firmly. "Same goes. We're in this together." The handshake lingered a beat longer than necessary. They were brothers now, not by blood, but by battle. Outside Murphy's, the Los Angeles evening was cooling. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple. Streetlights flickered to life. Clint and Bert stood by the pickup, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "You need a ride?" Clint asked. "Nah, about 6 blocks. Walking distance." Bert shoved his hands in his pockets. "Besides, I could use the fresh air before I tell my landlord I might be late on rent." Clint pulled out his keys. "What we talked about in there. Not giving up. You meant that?" "Every word, did you?" "Yeah, Morrison said I'm not good enough. Said you're not good enough. Maybe we're not. Not yet. But that doesn't mean we won't be." "Promise me something," Bert said suddenly. If one of us makes it, really makes it, we don't forget the other guy. We don't forget this day, standing in a parking lot after getting fired, drinking beer with our last $12. Clint extended his hand. I promise. They shook. A promise between strangers who'd become brothers over one afternoon. A promise that would hold for nearly 6 decades. 10 years from now, we're going to look back and laugh, Bert grinned. Getting fired will be the best thing that happened. You really think that? I have to, because the alternative is wondering what if. Bert started walking backward. Call me if you hear about auditions. Will do. Deal. Bert raised his hand in farewell, then turned and walked down the street, hands in pockets, head up despite everything. Clint watched him go. There was something about the way the kid carried himself that suggested maybe he had what it took. He climbed into his truck, the engine catching on the third try. As he pulled out, he glanced in the rear view. Bert was still walking, a solitary figure under the streetlights, heading toward an uncertain future with $5 and determination. All Clint knew was that on the worst day of his life, he'd made a friend, and somehow that felt like winning. 18 months later, everything had changed. Clint landed rawhide. What Universal saw as flaws, CBS saw as authenticity. His slow speech, his Adam's apple, his quiet intensity suddenly made audiences tune in. Bert found Riverboat. His improvisational style, his charisma became his greatest assets. They stayed in touch, phone calls every few weeks, celebrating victories, commiserating over near misses. One evening in 1961, they met at Musso and Frank Grill. This time they could afford steaks. You hear about Morrison? Bert asked. What about him? Got canned from Universal. Clint cut his steak. Karma's funny. They didn't gloat. Morrison had been wrong, and the proof was in every episode, every "you're hired." You ever think about that day? Sometimes, worst day of my life. Also might have been the best. Getting fired forced me to find my own way. Same for you. Bert raised his glass. To getting fired. To getting fired. Years rolled on. Clint went to Italy, starred in Sergio Leone's westerns, became an international sensation. Bert climbed through film and television, his charm making him one of Hollywood's most likable stars. By 1978, both were at their peak. Clint with Dirty Harry, Bert with Smokey and the Bandit. Time magazine chose both for their cover. January 1978, Hollywood's honchos. The headline read above Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds. The interviewer asked how they met. Parking lot at Universal, Clint said. 1959. We'd both just been fired, Bert added. The interviewer laughed, thinking they were joking. That's how we met, Bert insisted. Universal fired me for being a bad actor. Clint for having a big Adam's apple. We met in the parking lot, got drunk, became friends. The interviewer realized they were serious. Universal fired both of you? Same day. Then we had a beer and decided not to quit. Best decision we ever made. Within days, it became Hollywood legend. Arthur Morrison read the article and wrote them both letters, apologizing. Clint wrote back, brief, gracious, no hard feelings. Bert thanked Morrison for the rejection, said it taught him that being told no forces you to find your own path. In an industry built on competition, they'd maintained something rare, genuine friendship. When Clint won his first Oscar, Bert sent expensive whiskey. Not bad for a guy with a big Adam's apple. When Bert's father died, Clint flew to Florida. The bond remained. The 1980s brought City Heat, their only film together. It wasn't the expected hit, but working together after all those years was reward enough. Between takes, two legends reminiscing about Murphy's Tavern and $12 beer tabs. You really got fired? A young actor asked. Really? Best thing that happened. Through decades, through marriages and divorces, they remained constants. Not best friends who talk daily, but brothers. Brothers forged by shared struggle, by that parking lot moment when they chose not to face it alone. 2015, Hollywood retrospective, on stage together, both in their 80s. What's the secret to lasting? Someone asked. They looked at each other. Silent communication from 56 years. Don't quit, Clint said. And find good people, Bert added. People who will have a beer with you at your worst. Are you talking about each other? Yeah, they said in unison, then laughed. Hollywood's full of people who'll be your friend when you're on top. But the real ones, those were there when you had nothing. This guy, Clint nodded at Bert, he was there. Day one. That matters. Standing ovation. But they weren't seeing the crowd. They were seeing a parking lot in 1959, tasting cheap beer, remembering what it felt like to have nothing but each other. When Bert passed away in September 2018, Clint didn't give interviews, just attended the memorial and remembered his brother, the kid from the parking lot with $5 and a dream, who'd been told he wasn't good enough and proved them wrong, who'd offered friendship to a stranger and kept it for 59 years. At the reception, someone asked what he'd remember most. Clint thought for a long moment. The day we met, November 12th, 1959. Worst day of both our lives. He was standing in that parking lot looking lost. I asked if he wanted a beer. He paused. He said yes, and that made all the difference. Because that's what this story's about. Not fame or success. It's about showing up for each other, about choosing connection over isolation, about understanding that when life knocks you down, the best thing is finding someone else down there and saying, let's get back up together. Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds got fired November 12th, 1959. They bought a beer with their last $12. They became brothers for life, not because of what they achieved afterward, but because of what they chose when achievement seemed impossible. They chose friendship. They chose not to quit. They chose each other. And that choice, made in a parking lot on the worst day of their lives, ended up being the best decision either of them ever made. The promise held for 59 years. The brotherhood lasted until the end. Two strangers, one parking lot, a beer, a promise, a lifetime. That's how Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds became brothers for life.